Welcome. It's Patrick Ycaro with NorCal Strength Studio. We're at Los Gatos, California. Today we have David Landau. I like to call him the Maverick only because he got two guns and he likes to shoot from the hips when it comes to his hit philosophy. Welcome, David. How are you?
Thanks, brother. Yeah, I think I can get it in there.
That's right. I was going to ask you.
I haven't trained in a week, so I was going to train today, but I was focusing in on our conversation.
All right, I know we don't have much time because you got a client coming, so just give them a brief history with your how you started working out and through your process now in your relationship with Nautilus and Ellington Darted and all that, and then I'll start throwing questions at you.
Basically, I noticed I had a genetic propensity to develop muscle at an early age. 5 or 6 years old, we had birthday parties where we ate our birthday cakes and we lifted weights afterwards.
At 6 years old? Wow.
Yeah. No, because my father was a physical fitness freak, and he used to wake us up with his body odor early in the morning when he used to smell the body odor from him working out early in the morning.
Right.
So it was just a genetic lineage that I turned into a profession. And off and on, we all tried those Weeder programs, off and on throughout my early teens, mid-teens, and then, I backed off of it for a little while. I'm kind of lazy, got lazy a little bit, and then I decided to join a gym. And basically, first of all, I joined the real first gym I joined was a Universal gym at Youngstown State University. And we'll fast forward to the fact that wasn't good enough. I needed to train at a barbell gym. So there was a York Barbell Club in and around 1977 that I went to in Youngstown, Ohio, Youngstown Boardman. And I trained there for a while. And then one day we went to train at that particular facility, and they closed up overnight. They took the weights out and everything and shut down, took all the money.
Wow. Which
was something that happened for many years like that in a lot of other clubs throughout the United States. So we wandered around, and I fell into this eventually. Fast forward to about 1979, we fell into a place, if my date's correct, which was Charles Tri-County Nautilus in Niles, Ohio, where I'd met some of the guys prior to that at the 1978 Ohio High School and Weightlifting Championships. There were a few Nautilus guys that were following that. And I got into this Nautilus type of training, and it made sense to me. And subsequently, I wanted to find out more about it, and I decided to get a job at a place called Valhalla Sports Center, where they were going to build their first Nautilus Center. And it was around late 1979 when I started there, and I became an instructor in Nautilus training. I was very vociferously trying to get everything I could about the Nautilus training routine, and my colleague Jimmy Flowers helped me out with that as we trained. We were training partners, the late, great James Pucci Flowers. I trained with him. And subsequently, I got a job, thanks to him, at the YMCA. So I ran their Nautilus programs in Warren, Ohio, and then I branched off into Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I moved down to South Florida to continue Nautilus training. And subsequently, to make a long story short, I kind of branched off with my own type of training. I've been all over seeking out the best way to train. So, if we've taken a whole hour to go over how long I've been in this industry and how many different directions it took. But I'm here today to tell you how I garnered my knowledge, which was all of it was self-taught. I have no background whatsoever in the exercise industry, and I'm completely proud of that because I did everything based on my self-interest, my interest in trying to find the truth in physical training. And I did a lot of research on my own. None of the certifications that I went through ever taught me a damn thing except for what to avoid. I figured if I was going to find out, I was going to find out for myself. So if we're going to go over a biography, like I said, it would last a whole hour, and I'm sure you have a lot to tell me or ask me.
Right. Now, how did you? Did you want to add anything else to that?
No, I mean, I've done, like I said, a lot of people that know me, I've done a lot of historical research. I've hobnobbed with university professors on history of exercise and whatnot, and they were impressed with the fact that I didn't have a background in it, that I could actually teach it myself.
Right.
And a history of physical education itself, because I was kind of curious about where all these concepts came from, and if I were to learn about it, I wanted to find out for myself. I was once granted to go into the University of Jackson Memorial History and Medicine Library to research exercise that went on in the 1800s. So I'm kind of a freak about these things. I'm interested in what happened before and what's happening now.
Right. Now, if you guys don't know, David has a website called exercisefraud.com. You guys should go check it out. That's how I found David, through one of the blogs. I think it was Ellington Darden's blog. And his name came up, and he was, I guess the blog, people were going back and forth. It kind of like piqued my interest. Like, wow, I like this guy. I went to your website, and you have Twinkie makes you fat, cardio, and all that. If you guys want to learn stuff about his writings, go there. Please do. It's a great little still website, but you guys can contact him through that. So, David, tell us about your experience with Nautilus when you were down in Florida. Well, I know you still live in Florida, but you were exposed to Ellington Darden and even Arthur Jones, right?
More Darden early on, Jones later on.
Right.
I was lucky enough to, my father had moved down from Ohio to what is called the city of Deltona, Florida, which is literally 15 minutes from the old Nautilus Sports Medical Industries headquarters. So I had visited there several times. And every time I visited, I'd go into Darden and pick his brain. Ellington Darden back then. And there I bought I was such a freak. I still have some of the Nautilus t-shirts from way back then. With Jones, it was later on when a former colleague of mine said, "Hey, go ahead, I'll call Jones up and you go visit him." That was right around the year 2000. And subsequently, I went there on several trips just to see the guy. I could tell you so much about my understanding of Jones, his personality, and why he did what he did, and why certain things are the way they are, like the original 2 seconds up, 4 seconds down Nautilus training protocol that morphed into what is called, or what was called, super slow training. I can tell you where all that came from, and it's quite an interesting history.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, will it take long? Because I got a ton of questions.
No, not at all.
I would love to hear it. Go for it.
Basically, the first Nautilus book, it basically tells you about training, lifting the weights for 2 seconds up and lowering the weights for 4 seconds down. But basically what it wasn't a way of training. It was an illustration to how to treat the negative or lowering aspect of lowering the weight. So basically, Darden says in the book, and you can look it up, if it takes 2 seconds to lift a weight, then it should take 4 seconds to lower. Well, he was just giving you an example that morphed into a training cadence protocol throughout for millions of people doing Nautilus equipment. So basically what it was is by accident of mistake, or just by example, it was just a way of telling you what you should do when you, what cadence, if it takes 2 or if it takes 3 seconds to lift the weight, then it should take 6 seconds. If it takes 4, it should take 8. He was giving you an example that morphed into a training protocol. Subsequently, super slow came later on. 1989 was the first ultimate exercise protocol, super slow, which morphed into what was a 10-10. 10 seconds up, 10 seconds down. And there were a lot of people really excited over that protocol. And one of them was me. And since I had decent genetics, I was able to maintain a decent physique off the protocol. But I decided that I need to research this too. Where did it come from? So I delved into a book called Functional Isometric Contraction by Bob Hoffman back in 1962. And one of his training protocols was 10 seconds up and 10 seconds down. So I believe indirectly or directly, that's where it came from. It was nothing new under the sun. It was just a borrowed, failed protocol that Bob Hoffman used. This is my opinion, because I had spoken to national weightlifting champion Bill March, who said he used it. And, of course, you know this name, Tommy Kono, World Weightlifting Championship, and Olympic lifting champion, and he said he used it too. But basically, they referred to it as a passing fad, if you might. So basically, when Arthur Jones sold Nautilus, this whole super slow movement took over the old Nautilus instructors like myself. But hindsight's 20/20, and 10-10 is not. It's not even a good business model for a few, but it's not a protocol where you can actually gain muscle or even gain strength, and I know that'll be argued about. That'll be controversial for the people. Right. But the idea is that Arthur Jones stated this, as I told you yesterday. Arthur Jones said, exercise merely stimulates. Well, if it stimulates, then what are you worrying about putting an exercise cadence in front of the stimulus? Then you're putting the cart before the horse, okay? The idea is to stimulate, and then you're going to move relatively, in some cases slow, but not as slow as 10-10. That's like I said before, it's like dragging a sled across a football field. Right. Eventually you're going to get tired from that. It's not going to do you a bit of good, except for making you good at dragging a sled across a football field.
That makes a lot of sense, and you're not the only person that said this about the super slow. I think John Hart has mentioned the same thing. Jay Vincent. A lot of people.
Well, they're smart. There must be a couple of smart guys, but it took me a damn bit a long time to figure it out that the cart was before the horse. The idea is to stimulate and then let the form follow the stimulus, whatever that might be, and it varies from individual to individual. Well, as I told you before, if they're smart enough to come in and see Pat and me and a bunch of others, they're smart enough to have a say in their exercise routine and get a feel for what works for them.
Right.
They're not dummies.
Yeah.
The rest of the exercise industry is dummies, but the people that see us aren't dummies.
Yeah, because it's just like yourself. You have good genetics, and you were able to do it for a little bit longer than most. But for John Hart and Jay Vincent, even Patrick, he said they didn't get any results after doing it, a couple weeks?
No, I think I went longer than a month.
A month, and after that, you just flatlined.
Yeah, see, so it tells you how bad I got, yeah.
Now going
back. Better late than never, like I said, and I'm able to communicate that to people. Again, it's about stimulus first, form second.
Right.
I once said that to Jim Flanagan, and he liked that. I told him that. I said, let the form follow after the fact. not before the fact. The idea is to stimulate and then let it happen after that.
So when you say stimulate, now will this be part of the Landau logic now we're getting into?
I hope so.
All right. So when you say stimulate, since okay, we know that we have to have perfect form, perfect breathing, and all that. Make sure head and neck is aligned. When you say stimulate, the load has to be heavy enough to do some kind of adaptation to stimulate it. Correct?
Sure.
All right. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. Now, going back to super slow, I thought Ken Hutchins was the one that was in charge of that Florida, not super slow. They did a research for older folks to see osteoporosis,
yeah.
right? And then Ken Hutchins realized, oh wow, this 10-second protocol will actually work for older women, and I thought that's what started this whole 10-second protocol. I didn't know it was that guy. That guy you mentioned, gentleman you mentioned before.
It's older people.
Hoffman did it for athletic training and longevity purposes. He loved the idea of slower movements. They actually switched off the 5-5 as well. And there's also an old book called Functional Isometric Contraction Training for Football that also mentions that too.
Yeah.
The idea is, okay, you just said it there. It's for older women.
Right.
The only advantage is, and I don't have enough time to go into detail on this, but you're not doing any harm to your individuals.
Right.
And maybe a novice will build a tiny bit of muscle on it, but you're not doing any harm, so it's ideal for athletic training. Since athletic training is so screwed up today that doing no harm is a great direction. So if you were able to put some athlete and put him on super slow and then throw him out on the football field, he's spending less time in the gym, more time where he needs to spend his time.
Right.
In a particular sport. That's what's wrong with most training programs today, is they spend way too much time on drills and as I told you before, it's an even playing field, so it's not seen clearly across the way. CrossFit is one of those things where it likes to have its cake and eat it too. It says it's a sport and an exercise program. Imagine that. Selling people on a sporting event and also saying it's an exercise program too. Exercise is merely objective anatomical muscular strengthening. It's not a sport. And when it becomes a sport, it's no longer viable for exercise effect. It's viable for potential injury.
All right, let's go into the question. Chris Sanford from up north, Northern California, he asked, how do you determine one's frequency?
Experience. You have to see how you actually, I have a saying, it takes two to tango. It takes two to figure this out, okay? And you allow the trainee to have a say. I mean, there's many reasons, but ideally I know some people that recover so quickly they can literally work out the very next day. I have some people that don't recover well at all. I just trained somebody today, it's an older guy. It fatigues him so much that he literally needs a week to recover, but he's in his 80s, okay? I have a woman that trains extremely hard. These are people are coming to my mind. They train extremely hard. And if it weren't a week, we'd be forced to invent one. So sometimes once a week training is good. I could train literally one of my trainees 7 days a week, and you would never see, because of the aspect of how it impacts each individual. Some people can recruit very little of their muscular structures, and some people recruit a very high degree of it. And basically, they'll let you know when that happens if they're smart. Like I said, if they're smart enough to come in, they've kind of read about training hard, and the frequency is based on your observation as the trainer and then the trainee's feedback. I mean, it's hard because you virtually have to experience it for many years to figure this whole thing out.
Right. Okay, so Brian Collins from the UK wants to know, do you believe that CNS burnout is a regular occurring phenomena and that people really are training too hard?
Not with who I train, because basically you have to redefine failure. What happens is people train so damn hard, and with the so-called CNS burnout, a lot of people are told once they do a set to failure, you've heard of this, right? Run to the next machine and do the next set to failure. Well, that's a bad idea, because they're acquiescing to the so-called cardiovascular effect, which is a complete waste of time. If you're delivering muscle training, okay, you got to know, and that goes into the dosage, but you have to know when the person's ready for the next exercise. If you have a business plan that has to shove it into a 20 or 30-minute routine, some people aren't going to be able to stand it. They're going to end up laying on the floor as if they were shot by a gun.
Right.
And that tells you a little bit something. You're overduping the body's protective margins. So you have to moderate those things. So his question, it was, how do you protect against it? You don't allow it to happen to begin with. You have to read the individual and allow them to recover after the set. And in some extreme examples, you know, the person's their worst enemy. They see the results, and then they train much harder, and you have to kind of temper that a little bit, because training the failure and I know Drew Bay doesn't like this, but the word failure means you're failing. Train to success. Train as hard and diligent and honest as you can. Forget training to failure. It was a nice thing to prove to the athletes back in the day that they couldn't measure up. You put them on a routine, and they, after 2 exercises, they lay out, like in the old Quonset hut at Nautilus, where Arthur Jones trained, or as part of training Arnold Schwarzenegger, and after 2 exercises, I believe, I have it on an audio, he laid out on the pavement for about 1 hour. So you have to temper that. There's a lot of things I could tell you in this interview. You'll have to have me on a second time.
Yeah, I'm going
because
to.
there's a lot of things I've observed over the years I used to agree with, and now I disagree with them.
All right, so Brian Collins again from UK. How do you decide when the client is at failure, almost failure, and what does he believe failure is? So when do you decide where he's like, that client's almost there? I'm sure you stop shy of failure.
I've done something in recent years, and you could try it if you want. You have to ask the person, actually go to your last repetition, okay? And when you go to that last repetition, what I want you to do is hold it in the hardest position, an isometric hold or a static hold, whatever you want to call it. ISO, same metric length, same position. If you got this position here, your last rep, come down, hang on to it, and then fight it every degree of the way down.
Right.
This tempers that so-called failure to where you people don't lay on the floor after that.
Right.
Again, folks, avoid this laying on the floor after a set. All it does is your body's telling you that it's trying to keep you from that laying on the floor is basically protecting you from killing yourself. Okay, well, as I told you yesterday, and logically, Bill Pearl told me, he says, Dave, it isn't about seeing how far you can stick that ice pick into your eye. I have a saying they used to have on the beer commercials, know when to say when. That's from your end and their end, okay? That'll create the successful routine. Don't be obsessed on training somebody to bitter failure, because you're going to see that so-called bitter failure defines itself so differently on each individual. So you might as well just say, just train as hard and diligent as you can, and we'll terminate the set without killing you.
So what cues do you take from?
I know it's hard.
Yeah.
I know it's hard because most people are saying, when does failure begin? When do I train at failure and all this other stuff? It really, just back away from that.
Now, go ahead. You yourself, because I know you did a few bodybuilding shows. Now, those times you did it, did you train to failure, or you just train to train as hard and diligently as you are saying now?
You just train hard.
Yeah.
Be honest with yourself. Again, I bought into all that. I bought into all the so-called momentary muscular failure. Okay, that's when movement ceases and you can barely hold on to it, and it just literally falls off your bones or whatever. Looking back on it, I got better results with more frequency in my body. That was back in the early 80s when people saw the difference between training twice a week and 3 times a week. More frequency, believe it or not. It wasn't an economic issue. It was just for my body, my particular body situation. Yes, we trained as hard as we could. This train to failure is overpushed. Did I train to failure? Looking back on it, I have charts, but I don't know if I trained to utter brutal failure where I was laying on the floor after workout. We did those workouts, subsequently fell into that with super slow, but I was lucky enough to build a foundation of muscle where it really didn't disturb it when I started super slow in the 90s and early 2000s.
All right, so let me see. Who do you think is doing a good job out there in terms of training people, and who motivates or inspires you out there right now that's actually training clients, who's actually doing a great job presenting proper exercise science?
I haven't seen them lately. There's a couple of guys that you'll interview after I tell you who they are. Robert Francis out in New York, Huntington, Long Island. He has been into it about as long as I have. And Doug Holland out of Shreveport, Louisiana, are esteemed colleagues of mine, and we share conversations of the like, and we're on board with what we discuss 100%. I admire Jim Flanagan, just outside of Orlando in Longwood, Florida. I admire him. He's the man's man. He represents Nautilus the way it should be represented. He's a credit to the industry. Those are guys. The late great Jim Flowers, who introduced me to Nautilus training, he was an inspiration. But these guys today, like I said, the Jim Flanagan, Robert Francis, and Doug Holland are the ones that come to mind at this particular moment.
Now, going back to that carpet time, when that carpet time when people are just laying down there, I'm sure you're familiar with that Project Total Conditioning that was done at West Point. Back, I think it was Arthur Jones and Wayne Westcott. They did the Project Total Conditioning, and I think they did a total of 12 or 18 exercises. They had the cadets go through the exercise as fast as they can, and then there's 3 groups. One did the Nautilus protocol.
Oh, that was the West Point study.
Yeah, the West Point study. And these kids, they just...
Westcott wasn't there. It was West Point, not Westcott.
Oh, West Point. Yeah, West Point. So they had the cadets go through the Nautilus protocol, and they had another group who just did, I think, just regular traditional workout, and another group who just did, I guess they ran. And the Project Total Conditioning cadets showed a lot more improvement. I don't know if they pushed them to failure or they just ran them through this ran them through the workout really quick, but I mean, in terms of aerobically, their conditioning has gotten much better from that Project Total conditioning workout. What are your thoughts on that?
I've never investigated that as deeply. It's hard to investigate something that I never saw done.
Right.
It's hard. It's hard to investigate and research. Certainly, they had a point of briefer and harder exercise at West Point. There were some things that I don't recall right now that I was skeptical about. I don't recall at this particular moment because I haven't looked back on that study in a while. I have all the information in my library on that study, but it was impressively done. It basically probably showed the superiority of, I'm basically summarizing it, of efficient exercise over a lot of the drills that were used at that particular point in time.
Right. All right. So we're talking about conditioning for training, conditioning for athletes. We were just talking about not too long ago. Well, actually yesterday, about how some of these athletes are just completely overtrained. Now, did you ever have to train a professional athlete, collegiate athlete, where he just came to you, hey, David, I heard about you. I'd like for you to train me, work on my conditioning. Anything like that? Stories?
Like I said, I'll paraphrase Arthur Jones. I know there's a smart, intelligent professional athlete out there, but I have yet to meet one.
Right.
I wasn't exposed to a lot of athletes because basically I wasn't interested in what was popularly or what was in the culture at the time. I was interested in what worked. So if I recall athletes, I've had a chance to train athletes, and they heard about my opinions on exercise, and they didn't want to train with me because they had their opinions and I had mine. I didn't care. I'm interested in what the truth is.
Right.
So I've worked with some athletes and bodybuilders in times past, and I've had success with them. But they were exceptions to the rule. They were a little bit more intelligent than the average. Athletes today do whatever they're told to do.
Right.
And whatever's in the culture. So basically the culture drives the exercise scene today. And as I tell people almost on a daily basis, I've been in this industry for almost 38 years. And I've never seen it so bad. Because there's so many mouths to feed out there. There's the Pilates people. There's the CrossFit people. There's the flexibility and stretching people. I mean, everybody out there has a gag and a gimmick. And unless you're strengthening the muscles, the skeletal muscles themselves, addressing the skeletal muscles is the most viable way to do training. Anything that's activity-based, all bets off. And the problem is today you're going to say, well, we produce a lot of athletes out. You don't produce, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't produce shit. You don't produce anything. It's the athlete that you attracted to your training program. He'll flourish in spite of the routine, not because of it. So the thing is, I've trained a handful of athletes, and I don't even think about them because I'm more concerned about the individual, whether an athlete, a housewife, an old person, a young person, whatever they are. I'm interested in putting them in position to win in their lifestyle and in their life. So whether it be sports or recreation that they do, or just traveling to other parts of the world, or just increasing their ability to function. That's all that matters to me. Whether I've attracted athletes or not, it's a matter of fate on that. But I'm not interested in training an athlete simply because I want name recognition.
Right.
I'm interested in helping people.
That's a great thing. I'm the same way. I'd rather just see. Especially, I like training the older clientele because they benefit so much from it. And when they come back to me, Pat, you know what? my back feels better. I'm standing more erect because I'm making sure their multifidus muscle in their spine is being worked. Not just going through the motion of like rowing or pulling. I'm just making sure they're squeezing and actually activating those lumbar multifidus muscle. And this guy, uh, Bruce, actually is like 74, and he said, "Yeah, I feel like I'm standing taller," and that makes me happy. I like hearing stories like that, like stories from Margot and Gail who said they're getting stronger. Those inspire me. I love. I mean,
Oh, that's what's up.
I mean, when you train 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, they could care less. They're just thinking of like aesthetic. I care more about getting older people away from leaving their crutches behind, leaving their wheelchair, being able to get up from their couch with no problem. I love that. I love those stories. That's why I noticed that one video you put up on your Facebook, and you guys should watch it. David was training an older lady. What age was she when she was doing that leg press?
93, 94, something like that. Yeah.
94. It was amazing. Her cadence wasn't even super slow. I'd say it was about maybe a 4-second negative, 3-second positive. That's what it looked like. And then she didn't even go to complete failure. David just had her hold it there to a point where she can no longer hold it, and she was fine. I mean, she looked great. 93 and still moving like that. It's awesome.
Yeah, she trained on that set harder than most people alive, and then she stood up and walked to the next exercise. So,
Right.
What the hell? I mean, no, there was no carpet time there.
Now, what I was gonna.
What do you come up with these concepts? Carpet time. That just really just take a few steps back, folks, and think about what are you trying to do? Somebody once said, the idea in exercise is merely to stimulate, not annihilate the person.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you doing? Oh, yeah, I got annihilated. I laid on the floor. I threw up. And those are symptoms of somebody being heavily diseased. Think about it. Right or wrong?
Well, let me ask you this. So, does your clients? I know they're getting stronger, but how is their conditioning if you're not having them move fast enough? I know you told me last night that muscular work will benefit you aerobically. So a lot of these fighters, or like my son, for example, he's a Thai boxer, and like I told you, his coach hired a football trainer, and had him do all these things, workout. And I think my son got tired the first round. How would David Landau train a professional fighter without having to do all these crazy workouts?
Obviously, you get rid of the crazy workouts. You get rid of them. They're really you're bringing in a football trainer.
Yeah, he was having him grab the ball.
It's like, okay, I'm going to bring a gymnastic trainer. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, what do you think? You're bringing in. You have to address and strengthen up the skeletal muscles, okay? And you do that with the proper dosage of strength training, okay? Otherwise, you have a discipline that you need to practice more often than not in the squared circle, so to speak, okay? You would spend far more time on skills in the ring and tactical things of that nature, rather than burning yourself out in indiscriminate drills and gym. They just, see the thing I told you before, it's an even playing field, so everybody does it, okay? And it's not obviously going to be, most people aren't going to see it. Oh, but yeah, so-and-so does this and whatever. It doesn't matter. It's ineffective, and it basically tires the organism. Okay, it has a total systemic overload, and you don't want that. You want to be efficient at doing the things in the ring. Like George Foreman once said, I say, how do you train, George? I just ball up my fist and I throw it. Okay, he's not doing he got smart in his older age, and he knew how to. You got to learn how to relax in the ring. Do you ever see these people when they go out in the ring, mixed martial arts, and mostly in mixed martial arts? they're all freaked out, all stiffened and strained and ready to throw all their punches out early, and they burn themselves out instead of getting somebody to teach them how to have a generalship in the ring is where you do your work. Okay, training, yes, train and strengthen the skeletal muscle, but the battle is in the ring, and if you're wasting all your energy on drills, you're going to burn out sooner than later. It affects people differently, though. It's not readily evident because everybody's doing it.
So I mean, I know I got a separate skill training for that particular sport, and then of course your workout, your strength training. But what about the conditioning end? Does that come from skill training, but just sparring and doing the skill training over and over and over again?
That's my take on it.
Okay.
There's where you gain the so-called conditioning, or so-called, this word cardio, it really means nothing. It's really muscular endurance.
Right.
You're building up that adaptation of the endurance in the ring, okay? Like I said, and I came across something I haven't thought about in a while, but speaking to you, is people have to learn how to gain ring generalship, as you might. They have to experience the ring more and more general, because that's where you do your work, okay? Your preparatory training, fine, has to do with sparring and some of the disciplines, like I said, in mixed martial arts, require skill training. But for these strength and conditioning coaches in MMA, they're a complete joke, if you ask me. They're a complete joke. And then bringing a football trainer, I mean, I know there's been some really intelligent strength coaches in sports, but they're very, very few. They all kind of go out and they're all a bunch of hype. Yeah, I got to be strong and the core and all this other crazy stuff, and gets everybody fired up, but it doesn't mean anything. It's like the Alabama strength coach once said rightfully, I always thank God I have Nick Saban because he dealt me the stock I have to deal with. That's why they're not success. They're successful in spite of their training, not because of it. But everybody's convinced, oh yeah, they got the greatest strength coach. Yeah, those strength coaches, if they don't have the good stock, you're going to forget about them after a while.
But you have to admit, though, I mean, certain strength. Yeah, there's a lot of strength and conditioning coach, but I still think the HIIT protocol is pretty efficient in terms of like strength and conditioning, if done properly.
Oh yeah, no doubt, because you're addressing the muscles.
Right.
You're not addressing. So you got to be careful with that too, because that's what happened with super slow. What happens with super slow is you become really good at lifting a weight for 10 and lowering it for 10, but really doesn't do much after that. Yeah, I mean, slow is relative to the individual. It's relative to the individual. You got to bring that individual into play. You got to understand that individual. It's about them. It's not about you shoving a protocol down their throats. It's them basically give them the general idea how to train, and they chase it down.
Yeah. Now Now I know we got 5 minutes. You said you got a client coming in at 12:45.
Well, yeah, I got to go across the way, but no big rush.
All right. So your own training right now, what is David Landau? How's your training evolve? I mean, what's your training like, and how often? Like you said, sometimes you can train 5 days a week. I can't.
No, I didn't say it. Not today.
Oh, okay.
No, not today. Not today. I train twice a week. I probably could train 3 times a week. By the time I get to the weekend, I'm a little bit too tired from life itself. But what I've learned is I don't limit this. I don't limit to just one set to failure. Remember, you're putting together a program. You're putting together a program. You're going to be more efficient with this program than any other program going on. But remember one thing, okay? This one set versus multiple sets, you want to hear the answer to that. There's a very simple answer to it, and it's going to anger a few people, but it's true. anytime you do more than one exercise in a workout, it's multiple. Any more than one is multiple. So if you're doing 5 sets in a workout, that's all multiple. It's the idea is it's a systemic system overload, regardless of whether you do split routines and all this other. It's the system that gets fatigued. Okay, so all this stuff about split routines is kind of garbage. But again, a split routine just gives a person an excuse that it's addicted to exercise, train more often. But the thing is, it's the system that has to bear the brink of the training, regardless of how you train. So I train a full body. I probably do about a dozen exercises. Sometimes I do an extra set or 2 on top of a particular movement if I feel I didn't get enough stimulus after the first set. If people tried that outside the realm of their one set to so-called failure, took a few seconds to take a break from a set, go back and do the same exercise 2 more times, they would feel an effect that they wouldn't be used to, that they would enjoy. And if they got their bias and their psychological aspects out of the way and said, well, I'm going to try an extra set or 2, it's not sacrilegious. You have to open up venues. You have to see, why do people get results in other gyms that are huge and muscular and so-called appear to be conditioned? Because they're also doing the same thing we started with the program with the beginning. They're stimulating. They're not as efficient as we are. But if you take a look at some of the gym specimens outside the realm of high-intensity training, and you go to a gym and you see this muscular guy and you're going to say, well, I can get him better with high-intensity training, you're full of it. He will lose muscular size, and that, I'll leave you with that question, because we'll do another interview and I'll explain that to you why he will. Right. And I know it sounds like, oh, he's anti. No, I'm not anti-ed. No. I train brief and I train hard and I get the hell out of the gym.
All right, so real quick before you go, what can you leave the HIT community that's listening? Your logic, real quick logic. Landau logic.
Landau logic is train hard, train diligent, okay, and try extra sets in your workout, okay? Don't train like it's a race against the clock. Forget about your heart rate elevation. It doesn't work. All you become is very good at training, training from machine to machine to machine makes you good at training in a circuit style, but it doesn't transfer to anything outside the realm. Train the body, okay, not the activity. Forget about activities. Activities of our personal choice. It's not like I need to get up and move. I'll get up and move when I want to. It's my desire to move if I want to. If I want to lay down, at least the lion dog, when he's tired, he lays down. If you attempt to get him up on his feet, you're lucky he doesn't sink his teeth into you and bite the hell out of you. They know when to say when, okay? And a human being doesn't know when to say when. The idea is your life to enjoy, and if you like strength training, train intelligently, but don't train in accordance with so-called experts tell you. Do exactly opposite and you'll be closer to the truth.
All right, David, let's do this again. I know you got to go train your clients. Thank you so much for your time. You pick some interest. I got some more questions next time I interview you, man.
I wanted to leave you with that because there's a lot of things I've discovered once I went on my own and didn't acquiesce to this group think that's in high intensity. Once you figure out things for yourself, you say, oh man, it was there all along and you didn't realize it. Better late than never, though.
All right, David. Thank you, sir. Enjoy your client. Train him hard. Don't give him carpet.
She trains hard. Well, I just stand there and say nothing. She'll train as hard as hell. She's unbelievable.
How old is she?
I think she's in her late 20s,
Oh, okay.
and
All right.
and I can't use the words she used after the first workout coming back, but she used some very descriptive words. She was happy as F. There you go. Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could talk to you more. Oh, well. Next time, David.
You got it, my man.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
Good to see you. Good
Bye-bye.
to see you. Hope to see you on a trip to Northern Cal. I'm going to be there next year.
Yeah, give me a call.
Take care. You got it, man.
Bye.
Bye-bye.